Well, welcome, Meredith. Thank you so much for doing this.
Delighted to be here.
I'm going to just dive right in so we have as much time together as possible. One thing you will be shocked to know is that a lot of the students here are particularly focused on the unique journeys taken by successful people. And your journey is quite unique, particularly in the industry that you are in. Most people in the broad media industry got to the top by having a role where they either had relationships with talent or were creatives themselves.
They made journalism.
Exactly. And you were a salesperson. And not just any salesperson, as we were talking about. She is a legendary salesperson who
I've been trying to shake that reputation for 25 years.
Okay, well, it's so just keep it on the DL. But just for this group, talk a little about how you were able to leverage that and that journey from being a salesperson, what was useful about it, and then what you had to augment, and how did you do that to achieve the role and the success you've had?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I was realizing when my car pulled up, I've been to Columbia a lot, but I've never been to the business school. So it's a real treat to be here. And the New York Times is filled with people from Columbia Business School and has many openings for more. So see me after. Let me start by saying that I've been a lifelong lover and consumer of journalism. I think when I was 10 years old, you probably, if you'd asked me who had just sung that cool song, I wouldn't have been able to tell you, but I could go really deep on the long-term implications of the Iran hostage crisis. I was a nerdy kid. I loved journalism. I worked on all the newspapers in my childhood. I worked on my college newspaper, played a big role in my college life. And I thought I would go be a journalist. I came from the kind of family who said, you cannot go to New York to be a fact checker because you will not eat. And so I ended up taking a job right out of college at a company we both know called the Advisory Board, actually as somebody who's researching and writing. I was good at asking questions and I could write a little bit. And so that was my first job. And somewhere in that first year, I wasn't particularly better at it than anyone, but I was very productive. I worked very hard. So I won an award for producing the most reports. And I had to get up in front of the whole company and give a thank you for the award. And I was living at home with my parents. So I was probably wearing one of my mother's outfits, and I had a relatively sunny disposition. And literally the next morning, the head of sales for this think tank, the Advisory Board, was in my cubicle and said, come work for me. And that was it. And I would say from 22 to 30, I was there for a little bit. I did some other jobs, all in sort of sales, marketing, commercial things, and just felt soulless. It did not feel organic to my being. And the owner of that think tank, the Advisory Board, a guy named David Bradley, when I was 30 years old, he had bought The Atlantic. And I sent him a note and said, can I come talk to you? I'm not enjoying my career. I want to do something in journalism. And he basically said, come sell advertising here for a year. I said, I don't want to do that. I want to be a journalist. And he said, you're really good at sales. Do the thing you're good at. If you hate it in a year, I'll help you. I'll help you be a journalist. And 25 years later, it's 7 years there, 5.5 at Forbes, 12 at the Times. I've basically spent my career working to help propel a sustainable model for high quality journalism. And I would say to a group of people at maybe somewhere close to the beginning or the middle of the beginning of your careers, what do you take from that? I really have been trying to shake the sales thing for years. But for me, take the thing you're good at and use that to get into the space you want to be in. The homework that I do every night at the New York Times is I have to read and watch and listen to an immense amount of journalism. I would do that if they didn't pay me. I mean, it's a really, really great thing to do. I will also tell you, I get asked all the time, you knew you wanted to be a CEO. how did you get to be one? And I always say, really didn't know I wanted to be a CEO until the day they sent the announcement. Like I was a really kind of reluctant to that. But what I did want to do was I was obsessed with journalism and I wanted to solve bigger and bigger problems in journalism. And I think that probably helped get me to where I am. And then the last thing I want to say is, I haven't worked very many places, two of them for the same owner. I've really benefited from going places and sort of staying a long time and just working on bigger and bigger versions of the same problem. And even just like being known to the people I work with and having them be known to me. And I always tell people it's like almost better to go to a place that does something you really care about and be there for years, even if the actual job you're doing doesn't satisfy you in the moment.
Well, I think you're underselling the bigger
Never
concept of
underselling.
exactly, of course, by definition. But what you described about what you do internally really is a sales function. That is, selling
Absolutely.
yourself internally to get a broader remit is an hugely important skill.
Right now, my work at the New York Times is selling the idea, this really essential idea of what independent journalism is and why it matters in a world where I think there's just less and less public consciousness for that.
Which is a good segue to, I think it was in 2022, you articulated a tight, singular, overarching strategy. And for those of us who remember when the New York Times owned some TV stations, a stake in this and this and that and the other thing,
We owned part of the Boston Red Sox.
Red Sox, the strategy is to be the essential digital subscription for every curious English speaking person seeking to understand and engage in the world, which sounds kind of cool. But the reality is, a subscription first idea and strategy, everybody would love it, but nobody's got it. And the way it happened was over a period of time. So talk about how, separate from articulating a cool line, what was involved in making that, even culturally? I mean, 10 years ago, more than half of your revenues was advertising, right?
Yeah. So let me say a few things about it. It's funny. So I'm at the Times 12 and a half years. When I got the call to go be the head of advertising, like everyone in my life said, don't go. People said the Times' best days as a business are behind it. It's always going to be good at the journalism, but it's that the business part is sort of over as a big ascendant. Not that the business was over, but the idea that it had a future as bright as the past. And people also said, and the place is never going to change. So let me say, I learned two really big lessons about change at the New York Times. One is every person, every company, everybody has the capacity to change. The real question is, do you have the impetus? Right? Like, is something going to cause you to change? And we had this like great catalytic event at the New York Times shortly after I got there that caused us to change. The now publisher of the Times, a guy named A.G. Sulzberger, at the time was working in the newsroom trying to sort of report on what the newsroom needed to do to change and why it wasn't changing fast enough. And he spent like a year working with a tiny team on a secret report called the Innovation Report that was so secret that it was hand delivered, 8 copies. I wasn't important enough or senior enough to get one of them. 8 copies hand delivered, about how the place needed to change. 2 weeks later, it was on BuzzFeed. The whole world read it. It was 100 pages. Basically said the Times had sort of failed. It was winning at the journalism, but getting its clock cleaned by the BuzzFeeds and the Vices and the HuffPos of the world at finding the widest possible audience for that work. And then suddenly it was like, we didn't have to convince the thousands of people at the New York Times that they had to change. It was all there. It was like, this is what's going to happen to our business if we don't do it. And the second great rule of change that I learned at the New York Times is um, you have to make people comfortable that you're not going to break the thing that makes you so valuable to begin with. And I call it, you have to like name the immutables. And by the way, it should be a really tiny list because you're going to grow and you need all the change to get your growth. But at the times, what is that list? We seek the truth. We help people to understand the world. We do it independently. And it's like we had to spend a lot of time convincing people that's not going to change. And people really got it. And they saw that in our actions. And then the last thing I'll say is, and then we made some really hard calls. And that's really what you're poking at about the direction of travel for the business. That essential subscription strategy is really 10 years old. I would take you back to 28 years old, 2015. When we launched it, what were those hard calls? The most important call at the New York Times, most important thing that's happened to propel our success now is we said, come hell or high water, good times or bad, we got to keep investing in the journalism. That you could tell the whole story of the New York Times by that. We also said, and you're poking at this, got to be a digital first, subscription first business. That sounds like a big duh now, but I can tell you we're making gobs of profit at the time from those other things, newspaper and advertising. We said we got to live by that. Then we said this thing, and I actually think this has so many implications for businesses today. I call them the 4Ds. We said we're going to buck what the Vices and the BuzzFeeds and the Voxes are doing, and we have to honor these 4Ds. We have to be a destination. People have to seek us out, ask for us by name. That's the only way we make any money. We have to have direct relationships with people. We have to be a daily habit. We've got to be so good that people will, at scale, will make room for us in their lives. And then the don't D can't be drive-by. Like, this is not about somebody's going to like see us on Facebook. Those principles, by the way, power our business today. That's kind of why we are where we are today. And the other one, and this is, I joke, I like ran for office on this last one to do the things I just mentioned. We had to recognize that we were competing for engagement, for people's time and attention with the most powerful companies the world had ever known in the information space. And they were providing information at billion people scale. So we had to get really good at what? Making software. We now have 6,000 person company. We have 1,000 people doing some version of working on software at the New York Times. And all of that now allows us to be, continuously like building a wider and wider engaged audience for the work. And every business question at the New York Times, the first answer is, can we get a bigger and bigger engaged audience for it, not drive-bys.
So let's drill a little bit down into the product side of things.
Yeah.
So when one thinks of the growth of the business, a lot of you don't remember that time you described when literally the smartest people in the world really wondered whether people would pay actual money for online news.
There's this idea information wants to be free,
right, or
deeply insidious.
And so you got over that. You bucked that, but then you went to another level, which is turning the collection of information you were selling into a bundle. And then that bundle got bigger and bigger. And some of that happened by developing new products.
Yep.
Some of it happened by making acquisitions.
Yep.
But that has been the growth driver, so that you get more subscribers and you upsell existing subscribers to additional things and you keep them more engaged. And that is the trajectory. But in life, the low-hanging fruit is easy and the high-hanging fruit is harder. And so to keep doing it, I think the fundamental strategy is not changing, unless you tell me differently. Talk a little about where that growth will come from, what it'll look like in 5 and 10 years. Is it going to be a lot of acquisitions? Is it all going to be just investing in journalism? Is there going to be video? Is it going to be social?
Yeah, great. All great. Let me say two things, one of which but actually both of which may surprise people. I feel like I'm always trying to correct people's understanding of this. One is vast majority of economic value at the New York Times today and likely tomorrow and likely always comes from news, comes from how we engage people around our news journalism, all the authority, the idea that we have these great big brands, the rest of them, they borrow a lot of authority from news. So I've got to say that first. Second thing, I get asked all the time, what are you going to buy next? What other space are you going to enter? Listen, we have our long-term strategy, and the strategy does endure. We're trying to be essential for curious people everywhere. That will be enduring. That strategy has sort of propelled and is powered by four advantages that this is, I think, most of the answer to your question, that really matter and put the Times in a different position. The first one of them is we are already today in really big spaces that in some cases tens of millions of people, in other cases hundreds of millions of people spend time in. News, world-class journalism, broadly defined. One, sports, recipes, shopping advice, games. So we're in these giant spaces. We don't need to be in another space. I don't rule out that we might be one day, but we do not need to be to keep growing the company. Second thing I would say is what we have strategically and sort of thoughtfully invested into an engine that can produce world-class journalism and every other kind of content that we make. And now the existence of that engine and its breadth and its scale is like more rare and valuable than ever. It is really hard to do. We reported from 150 countries last year in every state in this one on every topic you could imagine. The Athletic, which is the sports site we acquired 4 years ago, it is by miles the world's largest sports journalism operation. It has 500 plus people, just journalists, covering sports in this country and other places. We have 11 games now, the big games, the ones whose names tens of millions of people play them. We created all but one of them, which we bought pretty economically, the one we didn't
Very
create,
economically.
and so on. So we've got this content, recipes, shopping advice. We've got this engine of producing content. We've also done most of that up until this point in text. It has mostly been stuff you read and a little bit stuff you listen to or interact with in games. Outside of games, our ability to innovate in format and to do it in video, what is that going to do for us? By the way, we already have reporters everywhere. We already have a machine everywhere. You add a layer of production to then put those reporters on camera. I've just published an article, or maybe I haven't even published yet, but I can go on camera and explain what is happening here. That is awesome. That is going to help us reach tens of millions of people who we don't already reach today. And by the way, it's trust building. You see a human being behind a story and they tell you, this is what I did to get this story. You're going to trust it more. And then lastly, I'll just say, our model, we're subscription first. We make the majority of our money from subscriptions now, but we actually have 4 growing revenue streams: subscriptions, advertising, where distributors pay us for our content that is more rare and valuable, and we have an affiliate business. So all of that has growth in it.
So let's turn a little bit to the environment in which you're operating, where there is indeed, and it's not one of those things where you always say, oh, it was better then, or what. There really is more polarization now, and there really is a lot less trust. And there's a lot of data that it's not just that you don't like the guy on the other side. Actually, 2/3 of people think that the party that they're not in is affirmatively immoral. 2/3. And amongst Republicans now, the percentage of people who believe that news is reliable and accurate is like single-digit percentage.
Mm-hmm.
And trust is essential to the value proposition you've articulated. So, and frankly, you are the target of a number of the people who claim that the overall environment is not trustworthy. So just talk about how you pursue your mission and you pursue your business
Yeah.
effectively with that kind of
With that as the context.
context.
Let me can I talk for a minute about like how I think we got here?
Sure.
I do think people have been complaining about journalism since the dawn of time. Often it's people who want to disavow the work, and sometimes there's very good reasons for the complaints. By the way, journalism, hardcore news journalism that holds power to account on behalf of the public, everybody should pay attention to it and complain about it when it sucks. I can't say that enough. It is done in service to the public. So there should be complaints, and the standards should be very, very high. Um, let's talk about how we got here. I think three things have happened that have really caused. I agree with you that it is very different now in terms of polarization and the loss of trust generally. One is, we've had more than a decade now of leaders in high places speaking out to disavow and discredit journalism they don't like. And that obviously has an effect. Often that is done to stifle further journalism. I think everybody understands that. Second thing that I think does not get talked about enough is most people now, including me, have some portion of their media diet fed to them by an algorithm, TikTok, Instagram, Shorts, pick your poison. What is that algorithm meant to do? It is meant to push you things that it thinks you already believe. It's going to match the proclivities you already have, and it's going to further them. That's not what independent journalism, by the way, that serves a purpose. I trade Instagram reels with my teenager all the time. It's fun. But that is not what independent journalism is. Independent journalism is meant to open your mind, to challenge your perspective, maybe to show you things you didn't already know. So I think that has shaped people's expectation for kind of what is media. And then the third thing that like never gets talked about is something like, sorry, something like 3/4 of all the newspaper journalists in this country lost their jobs in the last 20 years. Lots and lots of newspapers closed. What does that mean? Most people don't run in, especially people your age, don't run into journalism at like the level of relevance of their daily lives, at the level of like, oh, I have common interest with my neighbor who may vote differently, but we both care about Little League in the grocery store. So all those things have made it worse. What is different now? One, um, there's much less institutional reinforcement. I tell everyone who visits me at the New York Times, go look at the picture of Richard Nixon. We've got a boardroom filled with pictures of people who visited. Nixon is one of the only ones who wrote under his picture. He wrote the following: some people read the New York Times and like it. Some people read the New York Times and don't like it. Everybody reads the New York Times. Richard Nixon had strong opinions about how he was covered, but he understood that like democracy needed independent journalism, even if it pissed him off. And so that's different now. The other thing that's different now is there's all this other stuff, including Substacks and podcasts, many of which are very, very good, but a lot of which is not doing the work that journalists do, asking follow-up questions, having expertise in the space. And so there's all this like substitutional stuff. So what are we doing about it? I said one of the things already: put our reporters on video, let them tell you what they're doing. They're human beings behind this, and let them describe the professional process that they go through to get the story. I tell everyone, if you want to see what professional journalism does, or read it, read or listen to the transcript from the 2-hour interview with the President of the United States from a few weeks ago that 4 White House reporters did. It is unbelievable the level of preparation they had to ask him follow-up questions. That is the thing that's what professional journalism does. So we have to show more of the work. And the last thing I'll say is, our research tells us the more you use us, the more you trust us. So to the extent we can show up in lots and lots of ways in your life, in things that are in addition to our civic purpose and to the work of journalism on behalf of the public holding power to account. We've got 70 people at The Athletic covering the NFL. We have more chicken recipes that you can make in 30 minutes that are going to taste good, probably than any other quality place of recipes does, and so on. And so the more, or just come play our games. And if we provide you with fun every day, you're going to feel that, I think, that much more likely to trust the New York Times, or at least think we're worthy as an institution.
I always knew the answer would be fried chicken. Uh, so one of the revenue streams you mentioned that has
Yeah,
a long history is the affiliate revenue. And over the years, you have both come up with good value exchange
yeah,
relationships with the big tech companies, and you've also said that's not a good exchange. We're
yeah.
not doing that anymore. OpenAI, you are famously suing, and by the way, I recommend for. No, you're going to think I'm joking. Generally, briefs are not comic, but the appendix to the brief that they filed against OpenAI, where they show asking questions to OpenAI about, hey, there's a paywall here. Could you just tell me what it says? And it responds, sure. How about another paragraph? Happy to do it. And that is the evidence in the case. Uh, so you obviously have a tense relationship there, and yet I don't know if you announced it or it was published on leaked somewhere, but a bunch of internal memos have come out about all the ways that you are looking to use LLMs to both make your product better and also make your production better.
Totally.
So talk about two things. One, is there any cognitive dissonance between using them and suing them? And secondly, just give a couple of examples of
Yeah,
kind of the best of how you're using it, both on the revenue side, but also on the just operating efficiency
yeah,
side.
yeah. Um, None of that, by the way, was leaked that I know of. We generally
Oh,
we talk about the things we're doing with AI, and I do say, if you want to understand, we're actually suing OpenAI and Microsoft
yes.
together. I spent a lot of time saying and Microsoft. Um, I do think reading the complaint is just a good way to understand what we're trying to do. We're also now suing Perplexity, and I just want to say we have also made a deal with Amazon. So how should you regard this? What those lawsuits are about is protecting our intellectual property, which is the whole of our business, and defending our rights around it. So hard stop. Why would we sue over here or do a deal over here? We, as you say, have been open to working with tech companies where we feel like we have control over how our content is used, and there's sustainable fair value exchange for our work, and it's consistent with our strategic direction. So we are always open to that and have a long track record of doing it. Um, why sue? I think the stakes are really, really high here. And I want to say to you that to the best of my understanding, there's a handful of ingredients that go into making an LLM work. There's talent, and we know that they're paying hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of dollars, these companies, to get the talent to make their LLMs. I believe they are paying hundreds of millions, maybe even hundreds of billions of dollars for the power and the compute that is necessary to make those LLMs work. What's the third ingredient? They would call it data. We would call it copyright protected journalism and other content from the New York Times. They should be paying a fair wage for that too. So that's what that's about. I'm super passionate about the fact that that is not just an issue for the New York Times, and it is not just an issue for journalism. This is an issue for all holders of copyright protected intellectual property. It's an issue for society, and ultimately, it's going to be an issue for the LLMs, because if these places don't have a business model, there's not going to be high quality creative content produced anymore, including journalism. So that's why the suits. What are we doing with AI? Lots of things. I'm a runner. I now listen to a lot of the New York Times articles read to me by an automated voice, which I think it's on its third generation, and sometimes still mispronounces words, but it's going to get better and better, and it's already pretty good. That's a use of AI. If you want to make gochujang cookies, which is one of our most famous recipes, but you only want to make them for 4 people and not a dozen, you can use AI to scale up or down that recipe. And then I think most interestingly, and we're using it in again, lots of ways, um, we're using AI to help our journalists do more and more interesting work. So everybody remembers what erupted after the Sydney Sweeney jeans ad, and there was a sort of narrative that the left was just apeshit about Sydney Sweeney, and we used AI to actually prove that the sort of impetus for the idea that the ad would even be talked about came from the right. We used AI to comb social media and make that case. The Epstein files dropped, the giant trove of documents that we're all still reading about and we are still reporting on, came out on a Friday. And I think, a couple days later, we were able to say how many times President Trump was mentioned in them and do lots of other things. So I could go on and on. The big point I want to make to you is um, we do not believe that AI will be able to replace the very human work of a professionally trained journalist with expertise on a thing or in a region or on a beat, going out into the world and bearing witness, and then with creativity and expressively translating that, and with sensitivity and judgment for other humans into understanding. AI is not going to replace that. It can augment it, it can help it, lawfully used, responsibly used, but it's not going to replace it. And the last thing I'll say is, because of that, we actually believe what we do, it's all worthy of protecting and enforcing our rights around. It's also, we believe, going to become more valuable in an information ecosystem overrun with synthetically made stuff.
So let me pull on that thread a little, because your fundamental mission as an institution is to seek truth and help
Yeah.
people understand the world. This clearly does make you more indispensable for that purpose. But the reason it does is that AI has demonstrably played an important negative role as well in terms of undermining the trust in what you see being real and being the source of it being real journalism or even real anything, right? So on the one hand, it's good for business in the sense that you are an unambiguous paragon of commitment to truth, and the fact that trust is falling apart around you is makes you relatively more indispensable. But
On one hand, I
uh,
can't let that linger without saying the LLM makers are also making moves, all of big tech, the big platforms that are creating real headwinds for publishers too. And we've been very loud about that, as have others. So you got to think about those two things together.
so
They're not making it easy.
right, so I guess my question, and so it's up to you to because after this question we're going to open it up to the students, so start thinking about what you want to ask Meredith. But you have the opportunity to end on an up note or a down note. So my question is, since what you ultimately care the most about is truth in the
Yeah.
world, do you think AI net of all of those countervailing considerations is going to be the source of more truth or less truth in the overall ecosystem of what's being consumed? And understand truth and understanding, because
Yeah.
you could imagine it going either way.
Yeah. I think that journalism and most forms of creative expression are fundamentally about and in service, even entertainment, to our humanity. And I think we can never lose that plot. It's sort of humans doing things on behalf of the richness of the human experience. Now, I think The Times is not trying to slow the future from happening, nor are we trying to stifle innovation. We're 175 years old this year. We have seen, imagine what they thought when television came and then radio, then television, cable television, social media, all of it. We appropriately have had to learn how to work with technology to keep finding the widest possible engaged audience for our work. And in the news report broadly defined part of what we do, that has great civic consequence, not just the Times, everybody who does it. And so I am optimistic that the law is on our side. I'm optimistic that the public will come to understand what we're fighting for here. And, I am optimistic that people need journalism and they need creative expression. They need facts, and they need those facts, unearthed in the world by humans who can then express them creatively and with sensitivity and judgment in a way that they can take it in is understanding. I'm optimistic that the need for that will prevail, and should prevail, and that companies like mine are going to keep having to use technology to get more and more of it to people. And there will be plenty of things that AI can do to make, if lawfully used and responsibly used, to make the Times and other journalism companies bigger and better. But they've got to pay us a fair value exchange for our work.
Okay. Well, let's. Do we have somebody with? There you go. So, we got a lot. So why don't we start on this side to the person who is wise enough to sit closest to the right there, right to the aisle.
Thank you so much for being here. You briefly mentioned that the New York Times has journalists in all 50 states and also the impact of sort of the shuttering of many local media organizations. I guess, to what degree do you think larger media organizations that have the capacity sort of should take on an increased role in filling that void, as opposed to whether or not like that's part of the solution, or if it's more of like a sort of like nonprofit local media structure, or sort of like what do you think the future is of more local media, especially given that you did mention that it is an area where people can sort of coalesce and find common ground?
Yeah, it's a great question. You guys are business students. I think local journalism is a really hard business problem to some degree to make something work in digital. I talked about we're competing for engagement with companies that do it at billions of people scale. You need some economy of scale in what you do. But I also believe that when there's a real need, there is some way to do it. And I'll just say, because I'm in the business of truth, we reported from all 50 states. We're probably close to having reporters like in all 50 states. But I'm not sure we're everywhere yet. I think there are a lot of really interesting models happening, including some that are not for profit and some that are for profit, where you're seeing things work in local journalism. In Texas, in Minnesota, there are great examples where some combination of not-for-profit philanthropy and for-profit work is working. I'll just tell you, the Times really relies on there to be a thriving local ecosystem that is not us. It's really important to us. We get a lot of journalists who come up through the system. And we also have, when I became CEO, we actually funded, it was not my idea, but I was very excited to fund it. We have funded a program that supports local journalism at the investigation level that our retired executive editor runs. So we actually won a Pulitzer Prize in partnership with the Baltimore Banner, which is a local upstart in Baltimore, for coverage we did of how the opioid crisis in Baltimore disproportionately affected Black men, and the Times provided a lot of the investigation support to the journalists at the Banner who were doing that. So we really want to support the ecosystem, and I do think the bigger, healthier institutions have a role to play to do that.
I think we have somebody right next to you, so we might as well take advantage.
Hi. Thanks for the session. My name is Priyanka. My question is that media industries in general under a lot of scrutiny given the vivid information that is provided. So how do you make high stake decisions when the data is incomplete or the noise is very loud?
What a great question. How do you sort of separate the signal from the noise and make high stakes decisions? You did not ask me about the control structure of the
I
company.
didn't.
I think it's
I
one of the
didn't.
most
Yeah.
interesting things to talk about. I run a public company, but it is a family controlled public company. I'm gonna use this as a wind up to answer your question. That family control structure exists solely, it's not to enrich the family, it's to protect the quality and the independence of the journalism. And why am I saying that? I work at a 175-year-old company, 125 of those years we've been controlled by the Axelsberger family, which has given us the space to really know what our principles are and to stand for our principles. And I would say when you are faced with a really hard decision, do you respond to, very, very deep criticism about a piece of coverage, which, by the way, is a question that comes up at the New York Times multiple times a day. Sometimes some aspect of that criticism is valid, often it is not. How do you respond? We work really, really hard, and I could give you, what do you do about the AI companies stealing our stuff? We work really, really hard to say, what are our principles? What do we do for a living? What are the values by which we do it? And if we only thought about that and drowned out all the noise outside, how would we make that decision? We don't get it right every day, but I would say values and principles, we work really hard to stay focused on those.
Thank you. Thank you for the session, Meredith. I have two questions. The first one is on younger generations. What are the strategies you're going to follow so that they get a subscription? And the second one is about social media. How are you going to use it in the funnel so that they end up in subscriptions too?
Great. The second question is really big and important one in my day job. Was your first question, how do you get young people? Is that, yeah. So it's funny. You all probably will not be far along enough in your lives age-wise. When I got to the Times, to remember, there was a company called Mike.com that was like doing news for young people.
Chris Olchek.
And everybody was like, you should buy Mike.com. And we were like, why would we do that? What I want to say is it is incumbent on us everybody needs facts. You need them in your 20s, you need them in your 80s, right? And by the way, everybody plays games. Ask your grandmother, and I always say my 14-year-old and my 84-year-old 84-year-old mom play the same games, right? I think the way to have young people engage with and attach and connect to our work is just to make sure that work is A, excellent, and B, in formats and places where they're more likely to consume it. But the work itself largely doesn't change. The thing that has really, really helped, by the way, we have almost 13 million subscribers, but we've got a weekly audience of, depending on the week, 50 to 100 million people, even more in big news moments. And that's before you get to social media. That's just our audience. And one of the things I'm proudest of that's helped us bring many more young people into that audience is just like a more conversational or casual style of giving you the news, right? So it used to, even when I got to the Times, most articles were written in this kind of anodyne institutional voice where the humanity was stripped out of it. And now recognize, like, it's useful to think this reporter is a human being who's telling me something that they've seen and has the expertise to be doing that. And the best examples, the Daily is now like 9 or 10 years old. And the Daily, even when it started, it was like your friend was telling you about the big news story. So I just think our ability to give people the information in styles and formats that they can take it in is the most important. By the way, old people want that too. No, everybody wants that. As far as social media, I'll just say it's a really complicated business problem. We put our stuff on Instagram and TikTok. There's not like a direct way to make money from it. But one of the great things about the model of the New York Times is we always benefit from having a really wide sort of free layer where people can see our stuff. And if we aren't there, then people are getting journalism, in some cases from other journalism outlets, in a lot of cases from things that are not journalism that may seem like they're journalism. So the answer is we have to be there. And we are there, and we're there today, some, and we're going to be there more and more and more.
Woman up in the back there.
Thank you. Kind of piggybacking on that question, but in terms of, we've spoken a bit about editorial innovation, but in terms of advertorial innovation on your product, particularly branded content on social media, how are you thinking about monetizing your content there?
Yeah, meaning like what do we let brands do on our
Exactly, and maintaining independence editorially as well.
Yeah. So when I was the head of advertising, 12 and a half years ago, one of the things I brought to the Times was the idea that we could let brands sort of use tools to tell stories on our platforms. It's like a radical idea. Now that's like most of advertising everywhere is, brands are storytellers. I think you just like can never mess with anything where the consumer is like, is this an ad? Or is this journalism? And we probably have the brightest line there is. We just don't mess with that. And the ad business. So the short answer is brands do really cool stuff too. And at their best, brands are like doing ads that are not taking away from the quality of the product, and in some instances, even like they can be a cool experience. People always loved magazines because the ads were like some cases as good as the other things you saw in those magazines, but we just never mess with confusing people. You got to be really, really bright about this is advertising, this is paid for, and this isn't. There's like no way around that. The other thing I'll say is the Times ad business, we just finished an extraordinary year in advertising. We grew our digital ad business. It was a monster year. Marketers really want to be with the Times. They want to be with our products. And that is in part because of the trusted relationship we have at scale with audiences. And they don't want to mess with that either.
Right. Gentleman over there with the highest conceivable hand.
Must be tall.
Hi there. You mentioned sort of this idea of selling, the idea of independent journalism. I'm curious with what just happened at the Post, nearly half the newsroom let go, and sort of other conversations right now about the difficulty of holding a job in journalism. What do you see as the role of publishers? Are they profit seekers, philanthropists, nonprofits? Sort of, I know you talked about the structure that the Times has. How do you see that for other news outlets?
Yeah. Look, I think it's devastating for any for the community of readers for the Washington Post, and I think it's certainly devastating for the journalists who are affected. And honestly, it stinks for the whole of journalism to have that scale of loss. All losses stink, and we all have had to change, and we've all had to change some of the ways we go about the work, not the immutable thing. So it's what a bummer. It was like kind of awful, awful to see, awful to watch. I can't really comment on what happens next there or why or how. I can only tell you that one of the things that makes my job so enjoyable and great, and one of the things that I think honestly just makes the Times so great, is that again, we're a public company, but family controlled, and the controlling family does not have other businesses. They don't have other interests. That the whole control structure exists to protect, again, the quality, the independence, the sanctity of the work of journalism in service to what? Like nobody's interests but the public's, and even our own interests. Like I am the CEO of the company. I have no say in what we report or how we report it, and that's what makes the place great. And so what I can tell you is, um, I think that um, the more that the ownership structure of journalism can be independent from any other interest, the better. That really works at the Times. But I also, I think it's great to have people with resources plowing money into journalism, and I'm always happy to see more of that, as long as that thing I just described is intact.
All right, this is the last question, so the bar is high, and
Who
so
has the best question?
and so is that hand. So can you go up here? No, all the way
The
up
back.
top.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Also very tall.
Also very tall.
As a small person,
I'm discriminating. I admit it.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. You mentioned that for the New York Times, there's a part of the importance of engagement with content. So I was wondering, what is the strategy going forward to balance providing personalized content to your readers based on what they are more interested in reading versus providing the most important headlines and the most important news from an editorial perspective?
yeah, that's a great question. And that is also one that, like, in our day jobs, we're thinking about all the time. I think we have to get both things right, and we work really, really hard to get both things right. And what do I mean by both things? We have a responsibility. I think people come to the New York Times because they want to know what's the most important thing happening. And sometimes they want to know what's the most important thing happening right now. The thing that a newspaper did, that I don't think has been invented perfectly in digital yet, even by us, is just show you the relative importance of stories, with the judgment of editors who literally made a decision every day at, 5 p.m. to say, like, these are the 7 most important stories in the world right now in this day in history. In digital, like, we're serving so many different needs, it's much harder to do that. But I do think, and we operate in a way that we just have a duty and a responsibility, and honestly a business opportunity, because people have a need for it, to tell people you need to know these things are happening. It's a little bit like my immutables comment before, and then like all the other stuff. If we can, once you satisfy that responsibility, if our product can remember who you are, or even just know in the context of that responsibility what you've already read, we're all the better. And if we can get you, we own this giant sports newsroom now for 4 years. If we know you don't give a damn about sports, what if we didn't show you that on the homepage, other than when it's something that, like, everyone should know, right? So we're working really, really hard at both of those things, and I'll say, um, lots of opportunity to be even more personalized, but never so much that we give up our civic duty.
There used to be, I assume it still exists, this important meeting where all the important editors get in a room and they decide what's on the front cover and what is where. What is it called, that meeting? It's
It used to be called the Page One meeting.
right.
Then it was called something else because I think everybody was like,
Right.
got to stop thinking about, like, the paper as the dominant thing. I think it went back to being called the paper. Basically, I think it's called that again, but twice a day, what I described used to happen in print happens anyway, but now it's happening from all over the world. And it's sort of, the implications are what's on the home pages right now. How are we using all the important entry points we have to tell people what's most important? But I'm so glad you're ending there, because the thing, like, what I want to leave you with, journalism doesn't get it right every day. And I really meant what I said about, you should complain. You should hold the New York Times to real account. If you're going to complain, you should read the thing you're complaining about I didn't mention that. A lot of times people complain out of a campaign, not because they actually saw and read the piece. But what you should count on journalism for is that a group, in the Times case, it's a pretty big group of professionally trained people who've made it their life's work to, on behalf of the public, unearth information that really matters and get it to people in creative ways that really do drive understanding in service only to the public's interest. What I want to leave you with is an idea that that is happening. Happens twice a day in this big meeting, but that is happening all day long at the New York Times and in other great institutions of journalism on behalf of the public, not to serve our own interests. And I'll leave
And
it there.
having you here today furthers that even more. And we can't thank you enough.
It was fun to be here. Thank you so much.